The king firmly denied any knowledge of it. He didn't really know. Maybe, I don't want to get into his mind, but it sounded to me like maybe these could have been rogue killers. Who knows?
So new developments now. That from last hour, the president leaving the White House and this missing Saudi columnist. Mike Pompeo leaves for Saudi Arabia at any moment. This is the investigation into the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi intensifies. President Trump saying that he has spoken with the Saudi king earlier today for 20 minutes and flatly denies any knowledge about what happened to the columnist. Fox News national security foreign affairs analyst Waleed Fares with some thoughts. Now, Waleed, how you doing? And good morning to you. Let's start with what we know and keep it within bounds right now. The comment about rogue killers, just put all this together right now, Waleed, about where you think our focus should be.
Well, first of all, we need absolutely to distinguish between the legal case, the investigation, which appears to be very complicated. You have two versions, the Saudi version, the Turkish version. Now the president has just uttered very important words, meaning rogue killers, possibility of rogue killers. And on the other hand, the political warfare, which is between Saudi and its allies, Iran, Qatar, the Brotherhood, and their allies. We have to be very, very clear. That is a chapter that existed, the political warfare, for the last maybe 2 years. And that specific incident has to be treated in a very professional way, not in a political way. That's the big picture of it.
Can I ask you about the timing of all this, when you also consider the release of the North Carolina pastor Andrew Brunson at the same time that all of this was going on? Just a little over 2 weeks ago, we have the missing journalist in Saudi Arabia. So what do you make of the timing of all of it?
The timing is intriguing. Again, we don't have specific information, but the pastor was there for years, and the Turkish position, or Mr. Erdogan's position, was very firm, to release him. And then suddenly, as the Khashoggi case was opening, there was that release, and Ankara said, well, our court system decided that he should be released. Well, we know, any observer, seasoned observer of the Middle East would know that there is a relationship, but we don't have the big picture. It was versus what? We released the pastor. What do we get in return is the big question.
With regard to Khashoggi, what was his political affiliation? How was he seen within the kingdom and then outside the kingdom?
You know, Bill, probably this will be the question of the day. I'm surprised that very few people have been asking it before. I have looked at his Twitter account last week already. A whole year of statements. Definitely he has political positions. He is opposing the current regime, specifically Mohammed bin Salman. He criticized them. But he has been in full political warfare against whom? Against Iran and Assad and Hezbollah. This is why when we investigate, or when the parties are going to be investigating, every scenario should be taken into consideration. Just by reading his Twitter, it's open for the public. He has 1.2 million followers.
So what happens in terms of our response? What should our response be in terms of sanctions? What should we do if it turns out that this is true and it involves Saudi Arabia?
I've been arguing in the Arab media that the talks about sanctions, about taking action basically, has a political impact. We have 3-4 projects in the region, one of which is the Arab Alliance. If Saudi Arabia is under sanctions, we can't have an Arab Alliance. Our sanctions against Iran, if we engage in that situation without the investigation being clarified, that would weaken the sanctions. And last but not least, guess what? The Arab-Israeli conflict. One of the solutions that the U.S. is pursuing is to have an Arab coalition to help us. So we have to be careful not to go to Chapter 2, which is talking about the sanctions, before finishing Chapter 1, i.e. the investigation.
This administration has embraced the Saudis in a way the previous administration did not. We can all agree on that. Here's Marco Rubio suggesting if the evidence leads you in a certain area, you got to take some action. Here's what the senator said.
I can just tell you that in Congress right now, there is no pro-Saudi element that's going to stick with our relationship with Saudi Arabia as it's currently structured. If, in fact, they lured this man into this consulate, killed him, we should never accept that from anyone in the world. It undermines our credibility and our moral authority around the planet to go after regimes like Putin's or Maduro in Venezuela or others.
So let's just see where this goes. But what would, as long as we're in the context of trying to guess what happened to this man, what would be the incentive for the Saudi government to take him out if that ends up being the case?
Look, this is almost now a James Bond kind of projections. If I was the Saudi government or anybody who has some experience with intelligence and counterintelligence. Would I lure him? Would I do an extraction from a country that I have problems with? That would be the last thing I would do. But who knows? Some people, the president mentioned rogue. It could be rogue who could be infiltrated by a third party. It's really very difficult to project if you don't have the data. But obviously, Saudi is responsible for getting us the information because that incident took place inside the consulate, Saudi land. Turkey should give us the rest of the information because that's their responsibility as well.
Terrific insight. Thank you, Waleed Phares in Washington, D.C. Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Waiting on all that to come out. We'll see. Well, another big story today. Hamas